Yay.
Okay, so we're officially live.
Sweet.
Yay! So hey everybody, this is Maggie from the Apostate family, and I'm with.
Amelia, the apostate mom.
I love our names.
Yeah, they do.
So Amelia and I have this freaky connection that we found out not too long ago. As everybody on my channel knows, I was married to a very abusive man, and at my father's funeral, I found out that he had molested his two cousins, Kyra and Kendra. He had molested them when they were young kids, and he was, I believe, 18. And so that's my part of the story. The rest is for Amelia.
Okay, so back in 2004, I'll say, my son was born. At the time that he was born, I was facing becoming disfellowshipped because I smoked cigarettes um, and
Punishable by losing your entire family.
yeah, right, exactly. So, but I'm going to back up a little bit further than that. So, I became a Jehovah's Witness probably in 2002, late 2002, 2003, somewhere around there. I started studying with Jehovah's Witnesses, and I was like the eager beaver, study, and like became baptized within a year after I began studying.
Wow.
So during that time, I was not exposed to I really had no understanding of what the disfellowshipping arrangement was. They really don't explain that well, and the idea and thought that a parent and child would not talk, just I I just thought, surely, they don't really not talk to their kids because they're disfellowshipped or and that sort of thing. I just, kind of let it go because I just never really thought that it would be like that. So anyway, I started studying. I became a Jehovah's Witness, and I had just lost my mom not long before then. But before I became a Jehovah's Witness, I had smoked. I've smoked since I was 13 years old. It's a horrible thing, I know,
Wow.
but I had quit prior to baptism. I mean, I would sneak and smoke maybe one cigarette every other day or something. But but I kept it was agonizing for me because I felt like it was a horrible sin because I was in that indoctrination, that I truly believed that the Jehovah's Witnesses had the truth. Um, so I was, wrought with guilt because I felt like, well, I've got to quit, and then or my children were going to be destroyed. And I was terrified. And at some point, being a single mom, I had two toddlers at the time. They were probably less than 2 years old and 3 or 4 years old. So they
Wow.
were very young. And we, and I had no help from their father. It was just me. I had a really good job. My home was paid for, my car was paid for. I began studying with the witnesses, and then I began, being just wrought with guilt for smoking cigarettes and scared to death that I was going to cause my children to be destroyed if I didn't quit smoking. The anxiety in that didn't help too much, and I felt the urgency. This was near, oh, okay, here, so I can get a better date. So I started studying September 11th, 2001. That was when the World Trade Center was bombed. And the first meeting that we attended was an Isaiah book study. And during that Isaiah book study, I felt that what I was reading was um, like it was a sign, like God was telling me that, you need this, they have the truth, that you need to become a Jehovah's Witness, that, and I felt, gifted or special of some sort, that God would, call me, and, that that the truth would be shared with me. So I felt like, okay, well, I'm one of God's, children. And I,
Yeah,
this
we
is
were
so
so
funny.
prideful.
I'm one of God's chosen people. Okay, so anyway, fast forward. I quit smoking for several months. I got married. This story in itself is a really long one, and I'll try to stay off of it as much as I can, because it's rather embarrassing and humiliating. So, I'll share. Okay, I'll tell you, but I don't. But so I was attending the Kingdom Hall, and having that urgency, afraid that I was gonna. Sorry, there's a plane going across. I can't.
No, I just want to tell you, you have a special guest listening in right now. It's Adrian.
Oh, hey, Adrian. Oh my gosh. I'm so glad you're listening.
He's
Thank you
out
so
of
much.
retirement after 2 days.
Adrian, I've been wanting to just tell you thank you since you're on here. You have played a very special point in my. I don't want to cry, so
I
I'm not
know.
gonna cry. You've played a very important role in my child waking up and no longer being in fear for his life, and I can't thank you enough. And to all of you all apostates out there and your YouTube channels, and um, anyway, I'm just want to tell you that I'm completely and utterly grateful to you. And if you hang on and listen to the story a little bit, you'll understand a little bit more of what's going on. So, um, so
So
anyway,
stay tuned.
yes, just stay tuned. So my so I was going to the Kingdom Hall. I just gotten baptized. I had only been baptized for about 3 months, and I thought I really want to find a brother. There was no one in the Kingdom Hall that I was interested in, and so I got online and completely against, Watchtower's advice, and I got on jwmatch.com, and one of the first people I even talked to on there. He was from Mexico. He lived in Mexico. He has family in Mexico. Spoke very little English. But in my mindset, I was thinking, oh, he loves Jehovah. He's a good man, that, maybe he can help my children and myself come into, the new system of things. Maybe this is what I need. Maybe this, the stress of being a single mom is just too much. And maybe I need a good brother to help lead me and guide me and my children into the new system.
Of
Is
course,
what
because
I
we were
thought.
so safe. It was so
I
safe to find a mate through Jehovah.
I know, because it's God's clean organization. That's all they chimed all the time about,
Mhm.
was how it's God's chosen people and all this other bullshit. Okay, so we started talking, and embarrassingly enough to admit that within 6 months, after only very few conversations, we became engaged. I went to the elders and I told the elders, I was like, well, I met this brother online, and they were, gave me that, stern look. Well, you really shouldn't be talking to people online. And I was like, well, I've got the name of his congregation, and I'd like for you to call his congregation, on a conference call, and just verify that he's, a good standing member, because we'd love to be married within the Kingdom Hall. Okay.
Yes.
So their, reprimanding turned to all smiles, and within 2 weeks, we got the okay from the brothers at the Kingdom Hall to get married within the Kingdom Hall. So,
Wow.
um, fast forward about less than a month, um, my wedding dress was purchased, our wedding rings. He proposed to me on the first day that I met him.
Oh my
Um,
God. That seems
that
normal.
seems normal. And we got married. I can't even. We got married less than a week after we met face to face in a Kingdom Hall.
Oh my goodness. So he must
Yes.
have been in good standing.
Yes, they said he was in good standing. There was there was one conversation with his sister that should have, set off the red flags and said, go run the other direction. But of course, I ignored it because, this is God's earthly organization, and, what harm could be done? If he loves Jehovah like I do, then he's a good man.
And you
Okay.
probably prayed for a perfect spouse like I did
Oh, of
every day.
course. Of course. Of course. And I thought this was the answer to my prayers. I thought, Jehovah sent him to me, that,
Mhm.
we're going to be one big happy family. Okay. Um, so we were married, and within a week of being married to this man, I was terrified to go to work and leave him home with my kids.
Wow. So it was right away.
Right away. He, for instance, it started off really just ridiculous stuff. Like my daughter, I would come home from work and my daughter would run to me on her tiptoes, "Mommy, mommy, mommy,"
Aw.
and was so excited and happy to see me. And he would very sternly counsel her to not walk on her tiptoes, that she needed to calm down, and that sort of thing. And so, in my mind, I was thinking, several things like, why is he being such an asshole? And
Right.
then, but then internalizing things, I was more questioning, what am I doing wrong?
Right.
Right.
Which we
I
always
was,
did.
yeah, of course, women are conditioned to believe that they need a man, number
Hmm.
one, that they need a man's direction, number two, and that without a man, their home and their life is not complete. And of course, we're taught to be submissive to our husband,
Right.
that that we have to follow their direction. And and in my mindset, I was marrying this man to lead me into the new system of things. So I kept thinking, okay, well, I just need to be more submissive. I just need to, do what he says. And if I listen, and I don't ask questions, if I don't argue, then, maybe um, it would just benefit our family and it wouldn't be so, difficult of a transition for my children.
Right.
Right.
A peaceful
A
house.
peaceful house. Yes, exactly. So I was like, okay, I'll just tame my mouth. We'll just let things go. And it was within a very short time that I wasn't able to just let things go. I mean, my kids were um, toddlers, and at this time when we got married in 2003, I think. And so I think we got married. Yeah, we got married in 2003. And so my daughter was 2 years old and my son was 3 years old. He um, One Saturday morning, I got up, I was cooking breakfast, and the next thing I know, the kids are in the bedroom and they're yelling and, just are crying really. Francisco um, locked both of them in their bedroom, and for them to clean their bedroom. 2 and 3 years old, he just locks them in their bedroom to clean
Oh
their
my
bedroom.
God.
And I looked at, and and I went to the bedroom door and I was like, "Hey, what's up?" And I go to open the door and he just jumps up in the way, stands in the way of the door. And so at this point, here my kids are, hearing us, argue about, like, you can't leave a 2 and 3 year old in their bedroom and actually think that they're going to clean it.
Right.
They're confused. They don't know how to do that. Trying to explain to him, trying to give him the benefit of the doubt at first, thinking, well, if I explain this to him and just tell them, look, I'll go in there and I'll help them and show them how to clean the room if you want the room cleaned.
Right.
He
So
had no
right
part
away
of
you're
it.
saving the day.
Right. He had no part of that. I was, being disobedient. He was pushing me away from the door. I was insisting that my kids come out. But, the me standing there at the door, I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm just making things worse for my kids. I'll just, so I'm telling the kids, like, hey, just, work on your room, and I'm trying to help them to calm down. Um, and, this was within 2, 3 weeks after we were married.
Wow.
Um, Things escalated, and he became physically abusive to my children. And I'm not going to get into a whole bunch of details because I can't just sit here and cry about it all night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's okay.
So
We'll
he
listen.
became physically abusive, to the point, and I'll just explain to you the extreme points, to the point where my daughter was 4 years old. her head was had. Let me wait for this plane to go across, and I'm gonna light up my cigarette. I may
That's
heat this.
it. Everybody shun her. She's smoking.
Okay, so um, it got to the point to where he had shaved my 4-year-old daughter's hair. Her hair was down past her little behind, curly, wavy hair. And I come home from work. This is the last day I went to work. I come home from work, and my daughter is laying in the bathtub, and her hair is all over the bathroom floor. He refused to call her by her name. He would call her Stephen, instead of calling her name. She would tell him all the time, "That's not my name. Don't call me that." And he refused to call her by her name. Um, I went at that point. I had already been to the elders, and at this point, of course, I went to the elders again. They kept inquiring why wasn't going to the meetings, why I wasn't going to the meetings, and I kept explaining to them that my daughter, my children, he was being really bad and rough on the children. The elders were the special needs talks at the congregations were about how women should be submissive to their husbands, and so I began to internalize it even more. I
Right.
became very, very depressed. I became suicidal. Um, I was pregnant at this time. My uh, I was pregnant at the time that I had my first suicidal thought. I felt like the only way that my children were going to survive was if I just completely got out of the picture. I blamed myself for all the harsh treatment he had on the children because I felt like my kids were getting two conflicting, things. Like he's telling them, you got to sit up and be quiet and, do what I tell you to do. And, I'm trying to ease my children. Um, and so, um,
So you're being torn in two. You have to choose
yes,
sides constantly. I had to
yes.
do that too. But the elders never counseled your ex-husband.
They, I believe that after he shaved my daughter's head, they had words with him, but there was not any type of reproof of any kind that I'm aware of, that sort of thing. Um, and sometime after he shaved my daughter's head, and I was already at the, I, it's, I was already at the point where no, actually, at that point, it was just I was completely internalizing all of it. It was always all my fault, that I
Right.
wasn't good enough. I wasn't a good enough mom because already I was sneaking outside and smoking. I started smoking again, sneaking outside and smoking under being under so much stress at home. And so the fears of, dying and being destroyed and causing my children to be destroyed were coming back. Um, and I sought psychiatric treatment over being suicidal. Um, had, had eventually been put on 14 different psychiatric medications.
Wow.
And nothing could take the pain away of knowing in my heart, believing in my heart that I was going to cause my children to be destroyed, that I was going to cause my children to be destroyed at Armageddon, and that Armageddon is going to come any day.
Right.
And so um
Not this
it
man
was
who is destroying your family,
yeah,
but
I
it's your fault.
completely yeah, but it was totally my fault.
Right.
um so um I attempted suicide um at some point after that, after my son was born. I attempted suicide. It was bad. I woke up in the ICU after having overdosed and bled out a lot,
Wow.
and I woke up. I want to explain that night a little bit, um, or that early morning. Um, I had overdosed on a whole month's worth of 14 different psychiatric medications.
Wow. Oh my God.
I um, I lost at least 3 liters of blood. and I was laying in the back of the van. I had driven off in the middle of nowhere, and um, where I just knew nobody would be able to find me. I was always afraid, because all I thought about for several years was, for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, was how I was going to kill myself without my children finding me. And it was just constant obsessive thoughts. I spent several years just in the bed, just depressed and um, ashamed and guilty and all these things. I had become disfellowshipped. I I took the overdose. I could hardly move, and I'm laying in the back of the van, and then just this thought comes to me. Well, what's going to happen to what if, what if this isn't the right thing? And I had already believed at that point that Jehovah would not hear my prayers, that God could, that I was willfully sinning. God would not hear my prayers at all. So I hadn't prayed for 6 months, maybe a
Wow.
year. And I laid in the back of the van, and I had this, one thought, like, what if my kids really do need me? And I prayed, but I didn't pray to Jehovah. I prayed that, God, my creator, Jesus, whoever you are, if I am supposed to live, I pray that you help me and wake me up. And the next thing I know, just almost immediately after I prayed those things, I see, my vision is so blurred. I want you to understand. I couldn't see anything because of all the medication that I
Oh,
had overdosed on. I overdosed on a lot of lithium, and it makes your vision bad. But I saw light from the distance. And next thing I know, this man pulls me out of the van, and he says, "Oh, dear God, what have you done to yourself?" And I woke up
wow.
in the ICU 3 days later. Um, when I woke up, when I woke up, I realized that God woke me up for a reason, because that was the only thing that I had done. I prayed, and here I was. There's no reason I should be alive. I had overdosed on probably 1,500 pills, and had lost 3 liters of blood.
Wow.
Um, so when I woke up, I decided, okay, um, I have to get better. I have got to fix things for myself, for my children. Um, I had called Child Protective Services. I Child Protective Services stepped in. I kicked him out of the house. I went to a 21-day treatment program at a local mental health facility, and I just worked on getting myself better. I eventually came off of a lot of the medication, but I was still, from time to time, having suicidal thoughts. It was hard for me to, that those thoughts. Like, if you've ever been a Jehovah's Witness, you know that you have those lingering thoughts. But what if? What if it is the truth?
Right.
And you have those thoughts for a while, and it takes a long time for them to go away. Um, and so I eventually, sorry, there's an airplane going by. It's driving me crazy.
I
And
think that's normal.
so,
I think we all deal with that still every once in a while.
right, right. Um, it lasted for me for probably 6 months or so, after that incident. Um, I had let me see where I'm at in my story. Okay, so so when CPS got involved, I filed. My son at this point was almost 2 years old. My youngest son was almost 2 years old, and I filed through the court. Well, he filed for the divorce. I couldn't come up with the funds for the filing fee, or he filed for a separation at first. It was a separation. He kept even for 6 flipping years, he kept thinking I'd come back to him. But anyway, um,
Well, we're glad you did not.
why would I ever? So anyway, I left him, and I started working on getting my life back together. There's a lot of details in there, but I just wanted to just explain to you the amount of abuse and harm that this caused. So I had originally gotten emergency custody of my 2-year-old son through the court system, and my dates are a little fuzzy about when what happened and this sort of thing. But at some point, I ended up going to back to the I went back to the mental health facility because I was having those suicidal thoughts again. And when I went in to go get treatment, I came out, and um, he had went to the court and gotten custody of my son. This was at the same time that our divorce was finalized. So um, through our divorce, he ended up getting sole physical custody of the children, or of that child. Um, Even though he was substantiated through Child Protective Services for abusing all three of my children,
Right.
he, to make matters even worse, he was in charge of supervising our visitation. So, in order for my older son and daughter, to visit with their baby brother, they had to be exposed to their abuser for 2 hours a week, with the only time
Wow.
that I was given to see my son. And it was horrifying.
And as a Jehovah's
During
Witness, you have no paper trail that he's
Right.
abusing you because you're never allowed to go to the police. There's
Right.
no proof that he ever abused you.
Right. Exactly. So, um, so all I could do, all I thought was, all I can do was get myself better. So I got a job, I got a part-time job, and I was trying to just prove to the court, that substantiate, there had been substantial changes and so forth. I got a job. I was, I'd been raising my other two children. Um, and so I went back to the court in 2008 to get a modification of custody. In my mind, I'm thinking, okay, well, that maybe the judge's hands were tied because I was suicidal. Why would he hand him? I kept thinking, why would they give my young child, to a known abuser? He was substantiated through DCS for abusing my children. I
Um,
wish I had the report now. I could read it to you, for leaving bruises on them, for hitting them, for pulling them up off of the hair by their ears, but shaving my daughter's head, and it, I couldn't understand when I went back to court and the judge denied me to have custody of my son again. Um, at that point, these visitations with my ex-husband, so that I could see my son, he would try to lure me to have sex with him again. He'd pin me up against the wall and kissing me, and trying to push himself on me. And I knew that and I missed my son so much, and I knew that all I had to do at any point was call him, and he would bring my son so I could spend time with my son, but not without him pressing me up against the wall and trying to have sex with me, and that sort of thing. It was very stressful. My daughter was having horrible, horrible nightmares, having been exposed to him, blood curdling screams. It was horrible. Every single night, it was terrifying. And eventually, after I went to court and they denied me to have custody of my son, I felt the only thing that I could do in order to help my older two children to heal was to get away from the situation. So we left. I left in the middle of the night. I took my kids to a domestic violence shelter up in central Indiana. And we stayed there. While we stayed there, I took that as an opportunity, because I was always afraid, to come off the medication, to come off of all of it. Um, so while I was there, I stopped taking all of the psychiatric medication that they had put me on. In the back of my mind, I kept thinking, well, it probably wasn't. I'm probably not crazy. It's probably the religion that I was following. Um,
Oh. You knew
but
that right away?
yeah, I did.
Wow.
After I woke up in the ICU, I felt like, okay, I've got to get away from this. This is not good for me. I've got to break this chain of domestic violence in my family. I've got to show my kids that what is okay to be, how should we be treated? Like
Right.
my children were learning from me as an example, and I didn't want them to grow up accepting someone abusive in their life either. So I came off of the medication. Um, During the time that I was up there, and I didn't even know what it was. I did this completely without medical advice. I mean, imagine a woman who was put on 14 different psychiatric medications, who had just lost her young child, who had CPS involved in their life. Me coming off of my psychiatric medication, I felt like I couldn't tell anybody what I was doing because I was going against medical advice.
Right.
And I was scared to death that they would take my two older children away from me.
Wow. You're so
So I came off.
strong.
I don't know about that.
I do.
But so I came off of all the medication. I went through a year and a half of severe detox where I was having frontal lobe seizures, extreme pains in my nerves from having been on so many different very strong psychiatric medications. It was hell coming off of it. Eventually, I moved back down here with my kids after a couple years. We got a place down here, and I was able to see Ian more often. Um, and then I started working full time down here, helping my aunt manage her flower shop, and just progressively getting better. I was exercising every day. I lost over 100 pounds. And just made that commitment to make myself healthier so I could play with my kids at the park, so I could
Right.
just be what they need me to be, and stop hoping and wishing that God would send me somebody else. I
Right.
realized that I needed to be what my children needed, that I was enough, and if I wasn't enough, God would just send me that person. I needed to stop worrying about it.
Oh, I love that.
Thank you. And so anyway, I just worked my ass off and to make myself better, and so forth. I eventually, in 2013, I came off of disability. They determined I was no longer disabled. I was working full time. Finally, uh, I went to his father after the fifth time. I went to his father saying, "Look, I'm much better now. I'm not even depressed anymore. You can tell I'm happy. We just play and have fun. My kids, already have custody of my two older kids. I can take care of kids. I mean,
Right.
this is not fair. Just want to bring my son home and bake cookies for him and watch movies, not stand out in a park waiting for 2 hours while you're late and don't show up at all, so I can spend time with my son.
Yeah.
And um, finally, he came to me and told me that he was getting married. And once he decided he was going to get married, he changed his tone about me getting better visitation, unsupervised visitation with Ian. Um, so he agreed that after the week after their wedding that he would go down to the courthouse and sign an agreed modification for visitation, so I would have normal visitation with my son. um, this was probably in August of 2013, or maybe it was October or November 2013. It was just before Christmas, and I have to tell you, like, my son, the first, what some of the first overnights that my son had at the house with me. He came home after he had been. Um, I was okay, so I was allowed to have him every other weekend, one afternoon during the week, and half of like Christmas and so forth. So um, I was allowed to have the second half of Christmas. Of course, couldn't have him on Christmas Day, but he stayed with his dad for a week of Christmas break, and then he comes to me on the 26th of December. He brought me a Christmas ornament to put
Oh.
on our Christmas tree with his
Oh.
little handprint on there and his name. And I knew at that point that it wouldn't be long before, he he woke up and he realized that he didn't want to be a Jehovah's Witness. And as soon as I saw it, I realized that for an entire week he had to keep this hidden from his father.
Wow.
Imagine how terrified you would be being a
Right.
Jehovah's Witness, hiding a Christmas tree ornament that you made in school, that you had to sneak it home from school so that you could bring it to your mom a week later.
Oh my gosh. So he's strong just like his mom.
Thank you. So, um, so he started coming to the house more often. I never pressed the religion with him. I never even brought it up. I never brought up Jehovah's Witnesses. Of course, I shared, how I felt, that God's loving, that, that sort of thing. Um, and I would teach him things about domestic violence, like,
Oh,
explain to him what a narcissist is, and, um, and just, but most of the time we just had fun. We played
yeah.
together, we went to parks together, we talked, we chatted, we hung out, we listened to the radio, and just had a lot of fun. I knew when he was with his dad he wasn't having any fun at all, and the only time he could have fun was when he was with me, so we had fun all the
Aw.
time. So fast forward to January 2017, my son um, had recently had to say goodbye to his best friend, his older brother, who had joined the United States Marines, who he's extremely proud of. But he was already lonely. He had been expressing to me his loneliness for quite a while. He did not have any friends. Being a Jehovah's Witness, how his father wouldn't allow him to have any friends that were not in the Kingdom Hall. But even worse than that is his father never made a point to help him develop friendships within the Kingdom Hall with the children there. So my son was extremely lonely. When he was with his father, he stayed in his room and read his books. And the only fun that he had was when he would come see mom, and we would play. It was the only social interaction he had was with his brother and sister. Um, so after having said goodbye to his older brother and had been upset about not having any friends, I would encourage him, to ask his dad if he could, have time with his uh, Kingdom Hall friends. But he said that he just never had the time or made any effort to do so.
Wow.
So in January 2017, my son came to me and he told me, he said, Mom, you know what? I don't ever want to be a Jehovah's Witness because I'd never be able to talk to you again, or
Hmm.
Trey and Sarah.
He knew at
And
such a young age.
yeah, he did. And so at this point, he was 12 years old. Um, and that statement in itself, having not been raised a Jehovah's Witness, I never understood the perspective, and even not even understanding the disfellowshipping arrangement. I didn't have family, and so I didn't suffer being shunned by my family. I
Right.
was shunned by friends that I knew for a couple of few years, but I didn't even consider it until my son told me that, if that makes
Right.
any sense. So when he told me that, I realized how torn he must have been his whole life. And things escalated. I mean, things escalated to the point, because after he told me that, I, I mean, I had been allowing him to go to the Kingdom Hall if he wanted to go. His father, the a couple summers before, had asked me if I would take him to the Kingdom Hall, and I told his father that I would take him into Kingdom Hall and go to the meetings if he wanted to. I would, you know,
Yeah.
um, and those meeting times would come up, and my son would be like, "Oh, mom, my stomach hurts. I don't feel good." And
I
I
think
would
we
look
all
at
did
him
that.
and yeah, right. I looked at him and I was like, Ian, if you don't want to go to the Kingdom Hall, like, I'm not saying that you don't feel bad. If you don't feel bad, I'm sorry, and I hope you feel better. But I just want you to know that if you don't want to go to the Kingdom Hall, I am not going to make you go. And I'm just, and I said, if you don't want to go, I'll just tell your dad I didn't feel like taking you to the Kingdom Hall. or that I
Yeah.
wanted to spend time with you because I'd much rather spend time with you anyway.
Right.
So eventually he just stopped going to the Kingdom Hall, stopped asking me, stopped, that sort of thing. And then of course that was causing conflict with his father because I wasn't taking him, so he was missing the meetings. And he was getting trouble at home because he wasn't going to the meetings when he was with me during my parenting time. His father was punishing him, and so Ian had everything removed from his house. That's why he was only in his room reading. But his father had even laid down this reading rules. I forgot what Ian called it, like a 6-to-1 rule. So if you read for 60 minutes of Watchtower material, you can have 10 minutes to read whatever book you want to read. Bullshit. Can you, can you
Oh
imagine
God.
60 minutes of Watchtower material?
I can. I can.
What kind of
Unfortunately,
bullshit?
I can because I used to do the
Oh
same thing
my
to myself.
God, that's absolutely horrible. I could not even imagine. I mean, not a kid. I mean, I could see
No.
doing it to yourself, but like,
It was
horrible.
two watchtowers or a watchtower and awake and then Babysitter's Club.
Okay, so when my son made those comments to me, that's when I started just thoroughly researching this organization. I I looked at him and I said, Ian, you don't have to be afraid. God's not going to kill you because you want a relationship with your mom. And it sounded preposterous to me, and I didn't even ever consider what he might be thinking,
Right.
um, and and I looked at him and I was like, "Look, I promise you that it is not the truth. We've never talked about this because I never wanted to scare you, make you think I'm a horrible apostate, that I'm Satan influenced by Satan." I
Yeah.
said, "But I swear, just give me a short amount of time, and I'll show you. I'll prove to you that that stuff is not the truth, and you have no reason to be afraid." And he says,
Wow.
"Mom, even if it was the truth, I don't care." He's like, I don't want to be a Jehovah's Witness. I'd never be able to talk to you again." And
Oh.
so I pulled up, so like I scrambled around, and in 12 years, 12 whole years, I had never Googled apostate. I had
Yeah.
never Googled and researched anything about the organization. I just left it behind me, and I refused to read the Bible because every time I picked up the Bible, all I could hear was the New World Translation bullshit and all the
Right.
Watchtower stuff that came along with it, and I just wanted to leave it behind because it wasn't good for me. So I started Googling apostates. I got on YouTube. I found Adrian. I
Mhm.
found Zeb. I found Mike and Kim and Mark and Cora, and our life completely changed because
Mhm.
of you guys.
Aw.
And my son would be hooked on these videos too. We would sit down and we would laugh our asses off at Zeb, cheering him on. We couldn't wait for his live videos to pop up
Right.
on YouTube and on stream, and Down with the Towers too. Just
Yes.
couldn't wait. Like on the weekend, um, was just overly thrilled when the nail in the coffin videos would come up, and Mike
Yeah.
and Kim's videos would come up on there. And um after some time, Ian just started to realize on his own. I'm like to what listening to everybody's experiences, uh, and listening to all the apostates and listening to the reasoning that we had about um listening to the reasoning about behind the apostates and the way that they talked to the Jehovah's Witnesses, but more so the way the Jehovah's Witnesses responded to the apostates, like they're cockroaches or something. Like, treated them like they're completely dead. It just made a huge impact, just seeing that in itself.
Right.
So yeah, that definitely woke my son up, so he was no longer afraid. And one of the things that we could not wait until the November um 5th protest in Warwick. We sat we sat at the computer eating popcorn
Aw.
and was waiting for all of these apostate videos to pop up, and we would sit there and we would watch, you guys sharing your experiences, going door to door, um And that's when and I would find I was new. I'm really new to the apostate world, so I would try to figure out who was on Facebook so I could friend them on Facebook and that sort of thing. And one of the videos that I saw was one of the compilations, or maybe it was a standalone video, where um, I heard this young woman stand up and talk about how her ex-husband was a pedophile and a congregation and had raped two young girls. And I immediately started crying and I felt so overwhelmed. Like, who is this person?
I'm sorry.
And no, it was it's very touching. And um, I was immediately drawn to that story. I went to, I at some point I had added her on Facebook, but I never was able to make the connection. Wasn't sure who she was. You know,
Yeah,
I
I
had
was
her on my
nobody.
Facebook.
That was
I
the
had,
first thing I
yeah,
ever did.
I had her on my Facebook, and I had her on I saw her on the protest, but I didn't know who she was. And then just a few months ago, okay, let me back up. I got to tell a little bit more, and then we'll get to this. So
There's a plot twist, I promise
there
everybody.
really is. There really is. Thanks for hanging in here and being patient and listening to this whole stupid story. So, so once my son started waking up, he kept telling his dad, like refusing to go to the meetings. My son had listened to Jeffrey Jackson and heard about the Australian Royal Commission about how the Jehovah's Witnesses don't report in cases of child sex abuse. He watched news reports about it. He did not feel safe at the Kingdom Hall. He tried to tell his father that he does not want to go to the Kingdom Hall. One conversation that he told me was when he was there with his stepmom, and he tells her, look, I don't want to go to the Kingdom Hall, why are you making me go? And she she tells him, well, I don't know what your problem, you never had a problem with this until you started talking to your mom, I think, blah blah blah. And Ian said, no, like, you need to Google this. Google the Australian Royal Commission, it's a problem. He said they have a problem with child sex abuse. And his stepmom tells him, he said, well, if this were, she says, well, if this were true, then it would be all over the news and the authorities would be involved. And my son tells her, he says, they are, mom. You've got to Google Jehovah's Witnesses. He's like, you have to Google this. And she says, well, no, the only good source of news for us to go to is jw.org, right? And then my son tells her, he says, they are hiding pedophiles in the Kingdom Hall. Child sex abuse is a problem. And she turns around in the conversation. It says, look, I don't want to talk about it anymore. Don't you understand? I don't want to hear about it anymore. She says, I too was a victim of child sex abuse. And Ian was like, and she says, and I know that stuff that they're saying is not true, because they taught me how to forgive my abuser, and um, and look past and look past it, or whatever. The elders helped her to forgive it. She said that too much
Place it
time
in
had gone.
Jehovah's hands.
Yeah, to place it. Thank you. They taught her to put it into Jehovah's hands, and that Jehovah would take care of it. That sort of thing. And she told him that too much time had gone by. She said it happened when she was a child. And by the time she remembered, too much time had gone by in order for her to do anything about it. So Ian asked her, well, who is it? Is it somebody that goes to the Kingdom Hall? And she refused to tell my son who this man was that raped her as a child. And after Ian told me that, the very next day, I'm on Facebook and Maggie comes up in my news feed. She made a phone call to a Kingdom Hall, and or no, I'm sorry, to
It's
Bethel,
Bethel.
and right, and cited the one of a local congregation here, and So I messaged her on Facebook and I was like, "Hey, do you go to the New Albany Congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses?" Because that's what you mentioned. I was like, "My son used to go to that Kingdom Hall. Now he's made to go to the Salem congregation." And immediately she chimes in and she says, "You tell him to be careful. There is a pedophile in that Kingdom Hall." And
Well,
told,
he visits.
yeah,
Yeah, often.
and yeah, and so I'm on the edge of I'm about to die because I knew as soon as she said that who she was referring to. I just knew it. And I just kept waiting for her. I waited like a half a second and she tells me their names. And I was like, oh my gosh, how does this even happen? Like, I had just the day before had gone to Child Protective Services and had been told all of this information about her being raped as a child. And then now I'm finding out even more information.
So my ex-husband raped her son's stepmother when she was a child. There was two witnesses, her and her sister, same exact stories. Nothing was done. He was still allowed to have overnights with my son, or with my children. I don't have sons. And um, nothing. They didn't tell any of the congregations that he's been to that, he is somebody that you should keep your kids away from. So it just snowballed from there.
So after I found out that this happened, of course, like I said, I contacted Child Protective Services. I gave them his name. I called of course, oh, I failed to even mention that after my son told me that he didn't want to be a Jehovah's Witness and he started telling me all the things that had been going on in his home and how his father had been treating him and how the other Jehovah's Witnesses were threatening him that if he doesn't study and go to the Kingdom Hall and follow along during the Watchtower, then God's going to kill him. Dottie, this 88-year-old woman, he recorded her 45 minutes worth of a recording telling him that your mother ought to be ashamed of herself. She's going to cause you to be destroyed. That I don't know why you want to go visit with your mom anyway. She's just going to go down at Armageddon anyway, and we're going to have to clean up her dead body and her brother and sister and the rest of your family too. Telling this to my son, so I was pissed to say the least. So when I filed through the court by myself, I didn't have an attorney. I laid it all out in the court reports. I called DCS several times. My son was left over at this 88-year-old woman's house and he's recording this stuff. And he, of course, and he was there to call the police an emergency in the event that she might have a heart attack or stroke or dies while she's there because her husband was in the hospital and wasn't able to do that for her.
So he was babysitting her.
Yeah, he was. And I was extremely upset over that. Every time I called DCS, I was told that his father, even though his father was pulling him out of the Kingdom Hall, the elders of the congregation, his step grandfather was pulling him out of the Kingdom Hall, telling him that if he doesn't do what he tells him to do, then he's going to die. It's an absolute threat. It's illegal. It's called intimidation, and because he's threatened his life. Because if you don't do what I tell you to do, you're going to die. Um, every time I turned around, I was hitting roadblocks. DCS couldn't do anything unless there was physical abuse because his father was well within his parental rights to instruct him in the religion of his choice. Um, so um, the DCS couldn't do anything about the child sex abuse, about her being raped, because she has to herself come forward and report it to the authorities. Because even though she brings him to the Kingdom Hall brings my son there to the Kingdom Hall while he's there, since he is not a convicted felon and he's not a convicted pedophile, there's nothing that they can do about it.
Right. And there is a letter that my ex-husband had to write to not the girls he raped, their parents, and apologize for what he did. That was the stipulation for him to stay undisfellowshipped. He just had to write a letter of apology. So there is proof they could go to the authorities Um,
Yeah,
but they left it in Jehovah's hands.
so they lied. They either one lied to Kendra and told her that too much time had passed, like maybe they tried to tell her that the statute of limitations was up, and there's
Yeah.
nothing that she could do about it because if she was a child, or she was lying to my son and telling my son that, one of the two. But the whole point is that there is a litter in the Kingdom Hall that would convict this man of uh raping two young children at what, 7 and 9 years old, Maggie?
I believe
Is that
so.
right?
That's around the ages that they were. And um, Jehovah's Witnesses normally don't take repressed memories. They don't accept that as actual fact. So I don't know if that's what they claimed, that they were repressed, or they just were afraid to come forward until then. Not
I
sure.
This is what I don't know. I've never. I have a hard time believing that a child, two children, two young girls, having been raped at 7 and 9 years old, that they were not aware that something was wrong or someone had hurt their children. I can't understand that. And
Yeah.
maybe I just don't know about enough about sex abuse in order to understand that. I just really don't know. But I imagine it could have been both. It could have been either way.
Right. And I lived when we first got married, we rented a house a few houses down from these two girls and their parents, and they were younger when we got married. They were like, you know, tweens, I guess. And so as, I was 19 when I got married, so I just missed my sisters so much that I adopted these two little girls and would take them everywhere with me, and I would take them to the movies, and they would sleep over my house. All this time not knowing that I was forcing them to spend extra time with their molester.
Did they did they ever act like they were afraid or anything like that when he was around?
He was very like hated to be around other people. Like he just always wanted to be by himself. So when they would come over, he would generally be doing something else. And we'd be having girl fun because God forbid, a man be around too many girls.
Right.
But I can't recall. I wish I could say I do, but and I love that family so much. I felt like their mom was like a sister again. It was hard. I came from a big family, so leaving my big family, it was nice to have a lot of people in the house again, never knowing. And when the girl's parents told me that what he admitted to, that was my first thought. I apologized because I felt like I brought those girls around their abuser more than they should have ever been. Not that I knew, but it devastated me because I love those little girls so much. And you were saying too, the living conditions that your son was living in when he was staying with them, with the
About
dogs.
the Oh yeah. So my ex-husband, when we were married, we had bought a couple bull terriers, so I knew that he was into breeding dogs and that sort of thing. We lived in a really small mobile home, but having those two dogs, we still had two bedrooms in our house. We would A friend of mine, we bred them once, and a friend of mine, we would keep the mom and all the puppies over at her house in a outside kennel, and we paid her to help, and that sort of thing. That was the plan anyway. um Never in my mind would I have ever imagined having two dogs and what, 10 puppies and a house. And so I'd say probably 6 months ago, less than 6 months ago, they had already had three dogs. They have two Shelties and a German Shepherd. And um and 6 months ago they went and got another female German Shepherd. And probably it's been about 7 weeks ago, and when I come picked him up for a weekend, he told me it was during spring break. He told me, he said, Mom, my dog had puppies last night. I was like, really? And he was telling me that his dog, he like woke up in the middle of the, he didn't even know his dog was pregnant. He just found out 2 days before that she was pregnant. So apparently his dad knew all along. And um, so the dog had puppies, had a litter of seven. So at this point, they have four adult dogs and seven puppies in their home. And when Ian was here for spring break, they barricaded his room and turned it into a dog kennel. And my son has been sleeping on the couch ever since for 7 weeks. He complains every day about his back hurting and his neck hurting. And they like literally kicked him out of his room so that they could have puppies in his room, and they have
Wow.
a kennel in there. And imagine seven puppies, not litter trained, not potty trained, anything of that nature, in his flippin' bedroom. This dog
Wow.
gave birth on his bed on top of him while he was sleeping. He said he woke up and felt something nasty and slimy wriggling on his leg, and then his dog got on his pillow and peed on his pillow, and then that's when he woke up and realized she was having puppies. And so
Wow.
my son's already made several comments that, they don't care about me. The only thing they care about is whether I become a Jehovah's Witness or not. Um, he's
It's
he's
disgusting.
made, I know it is. And then for them to kick him out of his room and make him sleep on the couch so they could make money. I mean, come on. Who the fuck does that to their kid? And I'm sorry, but
Jehovah's Witnesses.
who the fuck does that? Who? God's only earthly organization on earth. That's what it
Yeah.
is. Oh my
The
God.
cheapest way to make money, like the best way to
Right.
not have a job.
Yeah. And yeah, she doesn't work. He works at Walmart. He's the CSM at Walmart. So then I found this out, and then I got online and I found out that not only is he an AKC registered breeder of these Shelties, but he also is AKC registered breeder of these German Shepherds. So he plans on breeding these two. He told Ian he's going to get a stud to breed these two female German Shepherds in this small two-bedroom home with four adult dogs, seven puppies, and then how many more puppies are they going to have? I mean,
Wow.
and it just it amazes me.
It's crazy to me. And, just thinking of Kendra growing up and being molested her whole life. And then to hear your story, your experience with this man that I'm sure is not any better to her.
Mm-mm.
So this poor girl has had just this life of misery.
It's
And
sad.
then to think that she's doing it to your son now, and then she's making it uninhabitable to live in his house.
Exactly.
And it's just disgusting. But I don't know if I'm skipping ahead too much, but the reason we were doing this broadcast was that I was going to beg for money
Yes.
for her legal defense so that she would be able to gain custody of her son. And I'll
So
let you take
July,
over.
yeah. So in July, okay. So in January 2017 is when my son came to me. I started researching and gathering a bunch of information with a lot of help from a lot of my apostate friends and the JW.org website. Thank you, Jehovah's Witnesses, Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, for all of your incriminating articles about how you shun your children and tear families apart. You've all been a wonderful experience, reading the Watchtower with my eyes open for once and seeing how terrible and horrible that your organization is with your shunning policies, the way you treat women, the degrading uh, ideas and beliefs about gays and lesbians, and the way that you treat those, because it has truly helped me in my case. So, without a lawyer, I have done nothing but work my ass off for the past 15 months, researching, filing one thing after the other through the court, um, gathering all this evidence together. And I was feeling so overwhelmed. Finally, at the previous hearing that I had a guard. The judge finally agreed to allowing a guardian ad litem to be appointed, which I kept asking because I can't afford an attorney.
Right.
And that would have costed probably $5,000 to $10,000 for the extensive amount of research that had been done for an attorney to go through. I decided that, like I had to become my own expert witness and dig through this. Um,
So
so
as Candace said in the group chat, you are our Erin Brockovich.
thank you very much. That's very awesome. So during which time, I opened up a secret
Oh no.
Facebook group.
Oh, I thought I lost
Sorry,
you for a second.
you did. My daughter's calling in. Hold on. Okay, so I started a secret Facebook group so that I could help other individuals. I found in my journey that there were many, many other people who were fighting the Jehovah's Witness parent for custody of their children. And so I opened up a secret group on Facebook. So if you're listening and you're in the middle of a custody battle, I have gathered a lot of evidence from jw.org that is presentable in court. I found that a lot of the information that was available online from other expert witnesses and stuff has been difficult to enter into the court because you have to have hard copies and not everybody has a huge vast library of watchtower material. But I found links to I've compiled links to the organization material. And so I presented all these things and all this evidence to my guardian, my son's guardian ad litem. And on Friday, I got an email after so long has gone by. And I was, I'm going to cry and I don't want to cry. It's so
It's
freaking
okay.
awesome.
You're gonna make me cry.
So I got the guardian ad litem's report, and she recommends that we have joint custody and that I will have primary residential custody of my son. And
Yay!
so
Everybody
all of
cheer.
the hard work has paid off, and my son will finally be coming to stay with us. And it was so perfect too because I've been working my ass. I've been working like 80 to 85 hours a week, working two jobs, trying to get up enough money to pay for a lawyer because I was getting scared because number one, I want to question Kendra on the stand. I feel very intimidated doing that. I feel sorry for her. She's a victim of child sex abuse. And in order to help the Indiana State Police convict her or convict this pedophile, we needed her testimony. And I probably shouldn't be sharing this on live video, but it would be very helpful for the case and if any other children had come forward. And I was feeling very intimidated by opening up those wounds for her. And so we were going to come on here and beg for help getting an attorney, but rather we are going to come on and just tell you that um, we won. Finally, it's been a really long journey and worth every freaking bit of it because we won. And
It's
thanks to
amazing.
everybody that has helped out. Like this entire apostate community has played a very special role in that, and I thank you all so much. So
I
freaking
know.
awesome.
It was just so amazing getting to talk to you and just like becoming so close to you
I
and
know it's
just
been
to be
awesome.
able to share in this with you and to have happy news. Like we didn't have to come on here and beg for money.
I know.
It's already
Isn't that
settled.
awesome?
And I think of that all the time. Like I want to just start ending my videos because the governing body's probably watching it, and to say like thank you for these people. I would have never
Yeah.
met you. I would have never met all my new friends,
Right.
and like
I
we're
feel the
all
same
there
way.
cheering you on. And I'm so proud of everything you did. You just
Thank
kicked
you.
ass.
I'm gonna have to pause this for just a second because my daughter's not gonna stop calling
Okay.
in because it's really late and I'm not at home. So I'll be back. Hopefully, I won't get
Okay.
disconnected.
So Adrian's on here, but he can't hear us.
Hey, Sarah. Hello. I'm doing a live video.
We can
I
hear
love
you.
you. They can hear you too. So
Hi.
I love you. I'll be home later. I'm sitting down at the river.
If
Can you
anybody
hear
has
me?
any questions for Amelia, they can ask them now while I'm looking. Did we lose her?
Sarah,
No.
hello. I'm doing a live video broadcast. I sent you a message. I'll be home within an hour or so. Can you hear me?
We can hear
She
you.
can't hear me. That's so funny.
Everybody's
She's
saying they
changing the
can't
phone.
hear you, but I'm really loud. I'm asking if anybody has any questions for you.
Okay.
What's it about? Was everybody able to hear that she won the court case and they're gonna have joint custody with, has primary custody. I don't know. I'm not seeing any comments. So do you have anything else you wanted to add?
Not right now. Not that I can think of. How about you?
No, not really. Just send me some Big Red. That's a necessity. All right, so I guess we'll end it here, you guys. Amelia, stay on after I stop the broadcast because I wanted to talk to you about something, but we're going to say goodbye to everybody. Thanks for joining our live feed. I'm so excited to actually get to see Amelia.
Yeah, I know. Me too. That's pretty awesome.
And we love you guys. And I'm glad you got to share in our triumph, or Amelia's triumph.
It's our triumph. Our triumph.
All right. Love you all. Mwah. Bye.
Bye.